Well, hey there, welcome back to the GameDev Tavern. Come on in, put your seatbelt on, we're going to fly through this one pretty fast. My name is Nicholas, and this is the last episode of the tutorial series where we create a pixel art beat 'em up game in Godot. Alright, in this last episode, we are going to be tackling all the little remaining items in order to finish and polish the game. So we're going to try to go pretty fast, but we won't be introducing anything new or complex, so hopefully you can follow along pretty easily. We're going to start with the death screen. When the player dies, we want to show some form of countdown that goes down from 10 to 0, and we'll allow them to respawn for the cost of 1,000 points. Let's go ahead and create the screen. We want it to be centered here, so let's go ahead and inherit from the margin container. And let's call this death screen. Let's go ahead and save it in our UI folder, and let's start populating this. So first, let's set the layout to full rect. Takes the entire screen. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and let's add a color rect. I'm going to call this border, and let's set the color to 888888. All right, we're going to have the container. Let's set margins of 20 pixels on each side. That should be big enough. Okay, now let's add another margin container. And this time we're going to set the margins to 1 pixel. This will allow us to have a border effect. Let's make sure we set the layout to full rect. And when we zoom in again, let's go ahead and add another color rect. And this time we're going to call this contents. And let's have the color 141414, which is the dark gray that we've been using. Now we want the two labels, one that says respawn and then the actual countdown. So because we want those vertically placed, let's have a vertical box container. And here, once again, set the layout to full rect. And let's add our two labels. I'll just add one for now and set the right theme. And let me write respawn. Okay, and this will want to be centered. Let's go ahead and duplicate it. The second one, let's call this countdown label. And in the vertical box container, let's set the alignment to center, so it's on the center on the screen. And then in the constant, let's have a separation of 2, so it's not too far apart. All right, this label here, we don't want to draw too much attention to it. Let's override the color. We're going to set this to CCC, so it's some form of gray here. And then the countdown label is just to have that start at 10 to start with. All right, and finally, we're going to introduce a new node we haven't talked about, which is a very simple node called timer, which just allows us to keep track of timing events. So here we're going to set the timer for 1 second. We're going to tell it that it should repeat every single time, start right away, and every second it will call the timeout signal, so we can just connect to that signal. Let's go ahead and create the script for this. Let's call it death screen. Okay, we're going to need references to the timer and the countdown label. Go, and let me make those in order, and then let's also specify what would be the first number that we come down from. So countdown start, this will be an integer, and just for testing purposes, I'm going to set that to 3, so we don't have to wait the full 10 seconds. Okay, we can get rid of all of this, and let's see, what do we need to do? Well, we need to keep track of the count over time, so let's have a variable for this. Var current count. Set that to 0 initially, but then inside our ready function, we'll go ahead and set it properly to the countdown start. Okay, and we'll want to connect to the timeout signal. Let's have this method here, and we'll just create it. All right, so what do we want to happen every second? Well, first we want to check where our current count is. So if we're greater than 0, we'll just go ahead and remove 1 from it, and then we want to refresh the UI, so update the countdown label. I'm going to create another method for this. We've been doing this consistently across all of our UI components. It's just a nice way to separate the logic from the rendering. So here the only thing we need to do is to set the countdown label text property to the current count. Make sure to use str in front because this is an integer. And let's also make sure we call refresh here because we're setting the current count at the top. Okay, and otherwise, well, we'll be destroying this object. So similarly to the UI, how we added the option screen, we're going to also add as a child, so if you were to instantiate it here, the death screen, so it kind of overlaps the rest. So let's go ahead and remove this, and we're going to be doing exactly like what we did for the option screen. So we're going to need a reference to the prefab. Let's make sure to load the scene and not the code. And then when we, let's see, scrolling down, okay, here, when the player loses health, let's check if the health is equal to 0. And we also want to make sure that the screen doesn't exist yet. So let's keep a variable similarly to what we did for the option screen. We'll set it to null initially. So if we don't have that screen and the current health is 0, well, we'll want to instantiate it. So var dead screen equals dead screen prefab instantiate, and we'll want to add it as a child. All right, let's try this out. Oh, actually, let me first reduce the health of the player. 30 is going to be way too much for testing purposes. All right, with 1 health, 1 hit, that's all we need. And come on, there we go. 3, 2, 1, perfect. And now it gets destroyed. All right, let's introduce the revive mechanism. So we'll want a signal to be sent out from the death screen and to reach out the player and perhaps the enemies here. We'll have the player revive and probably we'll have the enemies tumble. We'll also want the score to be reduced by 1,000. So we'll be using a global signal, and we can use maybe the damage manager's global object for this. Let's create a new signal and we'll call this player revive. All right, let's start by emitting that signal. So inside the death screen, we'll want to process for input. And here, let's first check if the current countdown is smaller than the countdown start. And the reason for this is we don't want that to be equal. We just want to give the player 1 second to at least see the screen. Okay, and then let's monitor for input. Let's see, input.is action just pressed, attack, or we'll also do jump. All right, so if we are pressing, then we'll want to emit the signal. And we'll want to destroy this object. So let's listen to it now. Hop over into the player script, and inside our ready method, let's go ahead and listen to the damage manager dot player revive. Let's connect to it, and we'll create a method called onPlayerRevive. All right, and what do we want to do in onPlayerRevive? Well, we want to first set the health to its max health. We'll also change the state to a jumping state. And then we'll want the player to just pop from way above the screen and come down. So let's give it a jump height, and rather than have a magic number, let's just create a const at the top. Let's set that to 80 to start with. Okay, and let's set the height to revive height. All right, and then now we'll want all of the other enemies to tumble on the floor. So all of the enemies are currently part of the actors container, so we can probably do that there. Let's listen to the global signal here. Go all the way to the bottom. All right, what do we want to do here? Well, let's just loop over all the children, and we'll check which ones are characters. In which case we can actually properly type the object. And this will give us some autocomplete. All right, so now we can just check if the type is different than character.type.player. So this contains all of the enemies, in which case we'll want to send them some damage. And we won't have any actual damage, and we'll just have them tumble. Knock down. All right, perfect. And lastly, we'll want to subtract 1000 points from the score. So let's hop over into our score indicator. And similarly here, we're going to listen to the global object. Let's go as part of the init function. All right, and let's hop over here. Okay, what do we want to do here? We just want to subtract 1,000 points. We want to make sure that the score doesn't go below 0, so let's just give it a max value of 0. Otherwise, we'll score minus 1,000. Actually, 1,000, let's also make this a const at the top. Let's do an exported variable. And let me open up the score indicator here. Let's set this to 1000 to start with. There we go. All right, and we also want to do those 3 lines. So let me just extract those into a different method, and I'll call this start update. All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and try this out. So with 1 HP, I should get hit pretty fast. Okay, I couldn't press, and now I press, I jump down, and my score is 0. Let me see, let me make sure the score works properly. So 21, I die, I come back, and it's back to 0. Great. Let's now create and plug in our game over screen. We'll start by creating a new user interface. Hop over into the 2D view. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Let's rename this game over screen. Let's save it in our UI folder, and then we'll add a couple of things. First, let's start with the color rect for our background, and let's set this to full rect, and we will set the color to 14, 14, 14. Okay, zoom in again. We'll want things to be centered, so let's create a margin container. And we will again set the layout to full rect. I wish this was kind of the default. And then in the theme override, let's set margins to 20 pixels each, similar to the respawn message. Okay, within the margin container, we're going to have the label that says game over, and then the score. So let's start with the vertical box container, and we will add a label. Let's set the proper theme. And we will type game over. Let's have it centered. And we are going to override a couple of things. So here, let's override the color. We're going to make this a bright red. And then in the font size, we're going to double the size. So this is 6, and let's make it 12 pixel. Okay, we want the score and then the actual score indicator here. So let's add a horizontal box container. And let's add a label. Set the proper theme. And let's type score. And finally, we'll have Control-Shift-A. We're going to be adding our score indicator here. All right, this is going to be our screen. And we are going to start updating the score after 2 seconds. So we'll need a small timer to keep track of this. Control-A, timer. Let's set this to 2 seconds. Let's go on auto start, and it'll be one shot. Just after 2 seconds, we'll just go from 0 to whatever the score is. Okay, let's create a script for a game over screen. And we won't need a couple of things in there. So we're going to need references to our score indicator. and to our timer. All right, and the ready method, let's listen to the timeout event. So after 2 seconds, we will want to start updating the score. So we will, let's hop over into the score indicator. Do we have a method? We don't currently have a method to just add points. Let's just create that. I think we can refactor this just a tiny bit. And we'll start with this. So the real score is going to be real score plus points. And so here it's just add points minus points per life. And here we will add points, this formula here. All right, so now that we have a method called add points, let's go back into our game over screen. There we go, and here we will want to add our score. Okay, and we don't know yet what the score will be, so that information needs to be passed down from the parent. Let's just have a variable for now. And let's create a method called setScore, which allows us to just set it directly rather than having to modify the variable inside it. Okay, so back into the dev screen. So here, when the timer goes all the way to 0, let's emit a signal that can be caught by the UI, which is the parent. Let's call this signal game over, and we'll just emit it before destroying our cells. Okay, so now in the UI screen, we'll do something very similar to what we have done here. So let's have a game over prefab. Let's have a reference to a game over screen. And when we create our dev screen here, let's listen to the game over signal, and we'll connect to a method called onGameOver. Here, let's just check if we have an existing screen. And if that's the case, let's go ahead and instantiate our screen. All of this is just, we're doing exactly the same thing multiple times. So now let's call the set score, and here we'll want to, let's see, do we have a reference to our score indicator? We do here. There we go, and let's just add a child. All right, let's try this. So, all right, let's see if I can at least score a couple of points before getting hit. All right, now if I die, okay, come on, hit me. All right, 21 points, I'm just gonna wait it out. 0, and there we go. So wait 2 seconds, and I go up to 21 points, perfect. You'll see that we can still press escape, by the way. The options menu is still available. This might be a matter of preference. I like it. I think it's good to be able to just fine-tune the music and sound effects, but some of those options might not always make sense. All right, let's just reset the health of the player, and let's get this back to 30 HP. And then in the death screen, let's keep the counter to 10. All right, so next I want to show you how to create a different stage and transition from one stage to the next. And this can be really useful if you want to build multiple stages and just scale this project upwards. So for that, we're going to start by creating a new stage. So we'll need to click on Scene, New Inherited Scene, pick this stage, and let's rename this stage -02-bar. Let's hop over into the 2D view. Let's go ahead and save it in the same folder here. We can actually tweak the music, and we have a second music for the second stage. And then if you locate in your folders, there should be an image called bar background. You can just drag this into the main background property. And you'll see the colliders here match properly. Let's go ahead and add a checkpoint. We'll just keep this stage very simple. It won't be complete just because we don't have time, but just wanted to show you how to transition properly. And then let's add a bunch of enemies. We'll just go ahead and add maybe, let's see, 1, bring this one 2, oops, have them here, and then let's have 2 on the other side, and let's have 2 at the top, and 2 at the bottom. All right, and let's make sure that, let's say we can have 4 at a time, and let's bring this checkpoint to, let's say 70 pixels. Okay, so the player will start here and we'll go through that checkpoint when they enter stage 2. All right, now that we've created a stage 2, how do we go from stage 1 to stage 2? Well, if you hop over into the world view, you'll see that the stage is actually a simple child of the world view. So in order to swap stages, we'll need to do a few things. So first of all, rather than have the stage 1 preloaded as part of the world scene, we'll actually need the world to figure out how to load any stage. And this will be just as easy as instantiating the stage object, either the stage 1 or stage 2, and then add it as a child object. Now we can't just add it anywhere, it can't be at the bottom because otherwise it would overlay the actor's container. So to make things pretty simple, we're just going to add an empty container, place it in the right spot. So let's add a node 2D, and let's call this stage container. And we're going to place this right where the stage is going to be. And so rather than have the stage be added as a child, we'll just add it as a child of stage container, and we'll make sure that this will always be in the right spot. All right, so let's go ahead and delete this, and we're going to have the world actually instantiated. Okay, so this now disappeared. Let's hop over into the code. Because we'll want to create instances of both stages, we'll need a reference to those scenes. So let's create, like usual, we'll just have a const with prefabs. Here, let's preload stage 1. Make sure to preload the scene and not the object and not the code. And let's see, and stage 2 bar. We're going to keep track of which stage we're currently on. So let's have a variable start at -1, and then let's go ahead and create a method here called load next stage. All right, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, let's increment the stage index and see if we still have some stages to go through. Let's just look at the size of the levels that we've created. Okay, so if we still have levels to go through, let's go ahead and instantiate it. And we will want to add it as part of stage container. But first of all, let's just make sure that this node is empty. So we're gonna need a reference to it. Let's go over and create an honorary variable. Okay, and I'll just go back down. And here, let's delete anything that's in there. So for existing stage in stage container dot get children, let's just remove this. All right, and now that this is done, we can just add the stage as part of a child object. We also need to do this when we are ready. So here, let's make sure that we load the next stage. Okay, and if you press F5, you should now see the same stage that we have created, except we don't need it here. It's actually been dynamically created. You can look in remote and see in the world view, stage container now contained stage 1. Okay, perfect. Now, whenever a stage gets created, if we look over in the remote view, you'll see that it adds a bunch of things to actors container. Now the enemies will pop in there and they'll auto destroy over time, but destructible objects like the barrel, the door, and collectibles will stick around. And we don't want that to persist when we go from stage 1 to stage 2 and replace the content of stage container. So similarly to how we clear the contents of stage container, we're also going to be clearing the contents of actors container. So let's hop over into the world script. So right here for actor node 2D, in here we're going to need a reference to actors container. So let's create an unready variable. Okay, let's stop the game right now. And actors container dot get children. We want to remove these. All right, now the problem if you start the game is you'll see that we destroyed a little bit more than what we wanted. The camera is lost because it can't find the player. And the reason for that is because since we cleared the actors container, we removed everything that was in there. And then when we added new stuff from the stage, we're only adding everything except the player. So this might feel like a problem, but actually we don't want to persist the state of the player. So when we finish a stage, the player might be all over to the right, might have a knife in hand, might be in a jumping state and so forth. We actually want to get the player reset in this nice and fresh stage. So we'll actually be reinstantiating the player whenever we load the stage. So to do this, we're going to be needing to do 3 things. So let's hop back into the script and let me stop this. So after we've created the stage and added it, let's go ahead and create a player. So we'll need a reference to the scene. There we go. And let's add it as a child object to actors container. Now, if you were to start this right away, you would actually not see the player. And the reason for this is because by default, the player has position 0, 0. Here we've hard-coded this location 45, 48. But when we reinstantiate it here, this is going to get back to 0. So we actually want to find a way to let the player know where it needs to go whenever we load a new level. And every level might have a different spawn point for the player to spawn. So let's go ahead and open the stage, and we're going to add this as part of the stage scene. Let's go ahead and create a new node 2D, and we're going to call this player spawn location. Then let's open both stage 1 and stage 2, which is going to take that spawn location and place it where we want the player to be spawned. Right here. All right, let me save both of the scenes, and let's create a quick method that will return where that location is. So let's have an honorary variable. This is a node 2D. Down at the bottom, let's go ahead and create a new function. We'll return a vector2 rather than the node. And here, player spawn location dot position. So now that this is done, back in the world view, once we've added the player, let's go ahead and place the player. And we can get the proper position from the stage. Get player spawn location. Perfect. And finally, the last thing we'll need to do is back into the world view. The actors container here needs a reference to the player because whenever it instantiates all of the enemies, it needs to plug in the enemies and the player together. So here we'll just need to add one final line, actors container dot player equals player. And with that done, we can actually start the game and we should see the player properly instantiated at the beginning of the game. All right, the last remaining bit to tie all of those pieces together is to let the world know whenever we need to load the next stage. So how do we know that a stage is complete? Well, right now, if you look over at our checkpoint code, you will see that whenever an enemy dies, we look at whether there is any more enemies in the queue, and we look at whether there is any enemies still alive. And if not, then we will emit a signal called checkpoint complete. So the stage, who is going to be the parent of all of those checkpoints, can receive this signal as well and look at it and say, who's emitting this signal? Is it the last checkpoint? And if that's the case, then the stage is going to emit a global signal called stage complete. So let's start by creating our global signal. So in our stage manager, we are going to create a new signal called stage complete. And then let's change the checkpoint complete so that it also includes the checkpoint. And we're going to look at all of the instances where that signal is emitted. So here we'll want to emit it and mention that, hey, this is me calling. And let's see, we have this one here. We're not going to use the checkpoint, so we can underscore it. And finally here as well. All right, so now in the stage, let's listen to this global signal. Let's listen to the checkpoint complete. And here we'll be checking who is calling. So the stage currently contains a list of checkpoints. So we can just check within that list if the checkpoint in question that is calling and is emitting the signal is the last one in the list of checkpoints. For this, there's a very handy way called getChild, where you can specify an index, and if you specify -1, it will actually return the last one in that list of checkpoints. So if the last checkpoint is the one that's currently calling, then we will emit the global signal stage complete. And finally, we just need the world to listen to that signal. So let's hop over into the world view and let's hop here. Actually, rather than having on stage complete, we'll just have load next stage. All right, to quickly test this, we are going to, first we can get rid of this player here. As part of the world view, we actually won't need it because we're creating it when we load the level. And then let me move the spawn point. So in stage 1, in the 2D view, I'm going to take the player spawn point and I'm going to put it right by the third checkpoint. That way we can go and meet Igor directly. And then I'm also going to lower the health of Igor. Let's set that to 2 health points. All right, with all that done, let's go ahead and try it out. Okay, so we're enabling the third checkpoint. Igor is coming over. I'm gonna kill him, and there we go. We have now moved to the second stage. So a couple of things are still wrong here. First, I see a bunch of errors. We're gonna be looking at this, but then it looks like our camera isn't moving here. So let's debug those 2 issues real quick. So back into the world view, let's look at the camera here. So the camera is not locked and the player's position is greater than the camera. Okay, this is where the problem is. So this assumes that the camera is always in catch-up mode. But at the end of the world, when the player is here and the player gets teleported back because we're creating a new player, the camera is now ahead of the player. So we never actually bring the camera back. So we can fix this pretty easily. Maybe let's see, the camera's position is 50-32 because it needs to be halfway through the screen. Maybe what we'll do is just save the initial position of the camera and just bring it back whenever we load the level. So that's going to be a pretty, I guess, quick and easy way to do this. So camera initial position is going to be a vector 2. And then in our ready method, let's go ahead and persist this. Let's do it before. And then when we load the stage, right here, we'll set the camera's position to the camera initial position. All right, let's try this once again. All right, there we go. So the camera is coming back and you can see that it navigated from the right-hand side. We can quickly fix this. Let me look at the debugger errors real quick. All right, so a bunch of errors here. This is, we have seen this before. This is the fact that we are emptying these arrays and then we're adding new things, but it hasn't finished flushing things out. So we could be using a bunch of call deferred and set deferred. We have a bunch of things we're assigning here. My guess is probably the cleanest way is to do the cleanup first, and then in the next frame to actually prepare the stage. So let's create another method. Let's create another variable. Is stage ready for loading? We'll set that to false initially. And then here, after we have cleaned up everything, we'll set that to true. And then in our process method, let's do it right here. Then let's set this back to false, and then let's go ahead and load. We should probably put this in a different method altogether, but okay, we can create the stage, and let's bring all of this code right here. All right, let's try this out. Just want to make sure that it clears the errors, and then we can refactor this right after. So Igor's coming over, and okay, there's one more error. Let's take a look at it. Ready, node not found. The player, because we removed the player here, so we actually don't need to have a reference here. We'll just need to take this and make it a variable. Okay, and then when we set the player, let's see the camera. Okay, so I think this should, let's double check that the player is not null here. All right, Igor, where are you? There you go. And there we go, no more errors. And we've successfully gone from one stage to the next. Let's see if we can get all of those guys to show up, and yeah, awesome. All right, so I know that we're out of time, but there's just one last thing I would really want to do, which is that right now the transition between the various stages is just awful and it's just not subtle. So we can quickly ease this a little bit. Let's go ahead and create a new scene. We're going to make it a user interface, hop over into the 2D view, and let's call this stage transition. Let's go ahead and save it inside our UI folder. This is perfect. We're going to start by adding a texture rect. And we're going to zoom in a little bit. And let's bring the image called screen transition.png into the texture property. All right, and let's change the modulate to 14, 14, 14, and we're going to reuse the same gray that we've been using. So let's rename this transition texture. The way this is going to work is extremely simple. By default, this texture is going to be placed here. This is going to be part of the UI. Whenever we finish the stage, this texture is just going to be dragged over the entire screen. It's going to hide all the contents. We're going to be loading the second stage, and then once the stage is loaded, we're just going to bring this to the other side of the screen. It's just going to make for a nice little transition, and we won't see things move as much. All right, so let me place this, let's see, layout, transform. So let's set this to -200 and 0 to start with. We're going to need an animation player. Let's start by creating our animations. So first we'll have an idle default animation where we'll just want to set the, let's say this to 0.1, the snap to 0.1, and we'll just set the position to what it currently is. So just set a breakpoint here. And next, let's create another animation. We'll call this start transition. This is going to last 0.4 seconds. It's not going to loop, and let's keep the snap here. We're going to start the position at -200, and at the end of the animation, we're going to go all the way to -50. So it covers the entire screen. Create another breakpoint, and you can see here the transition. Okay, let's create another animation. Let's call this end transition. And similarly, this is going to last 0.4 seconds. The starting point is going to be -50. Set a breakpoint, and then go to the end, and let's go to 100 and set another breakpoint. And finally, we want to have a idle state where the transition screen is in the middle. So similar to the idle state, but it'll be right here. So let's create another animation. We'll call this interim. And this is actually perfect. That's what we want. And let's just set a breakpoint here. Okay, let's make sure that this is looped in and that it lasts 0.1. We'll actually make this the default rather than the idle state, so that when we start the game initially, we actually have a nice cover, and then this just will exit. All right, so now that this is done, let's go ahead and write a script for this. We can keep that name right here. That's great. And then we're going to need a reference to our animation player. So hopefully everything that we're doing now kind of starts to ring a bell. It starts to sound a little bit redundant and is really trivial for you to wrap your head around. All right, and let's create a couple of methods that can be called from the outside. We'll have a start transition method where we'll just set the animation player's animation to start transition. Let's do the same for playing the end animation and transition. All right, and then we'll need 2 callbacks when the animations have completed. Start with the first one. And here we will want to move into the interim state. So this is, a very simple state machine. We've done a ton of those. We don't need to actually specify the enum every single time, given that this is just an animation going from one state to the next. The last callback, we'll just want to move back into the idle state. Okay, so let's hop over into the start transition, and at the end, let's create a callback. Right click, insert key, and on complete start transition. And then we'll do the same thing for end transition. Go to the end, add track, call method, on stage transition, right click, insert key, on complete end transition. All right, so this works well, and now we will want to add this to our UI. So let's go to the 2D view, let's add it to our UI container, Control-Shift-A, stage transition, and this looks great. Okay, so now we want the UI to be the main component listening to the stage complete so that it can start the transition of this screen here. So let's hop over into the code, and inside the init method, let's listen for the stage complete. On stage complete bind. Let's create this method. Create right below this one. And here we will want to start the transition. So we'll need a reference to it. Let's create an unready variable. There we go, and back to the bottom. Stage transition. So here we will want to start the transition. Okay, and when we have the transition and we are right in the middle, so the screen is hidden, we'll want that stage transition to actually emit a signal, which can be caught by the world, and this is where we will do the loading. So let's hop back into the script and let's go into our stage manager, and we're going to create another signal. Let's call this stage interim. And then in our stage transition, we'll go ahead and emit the signal here. All right, so now into our world view, scrolling back to the top, we will want to not listen to the stage complete here. We want to listen to the stage interim. And when we're done loading, we'll want to finish the transition. So the let's see, the world view here actually has access to the stage transition. It's a grandchild of it. So we can actually have an unready variable from the world view. Let me just close this and back into the script. Hop over to the top. Is. And when we are done right here loading, we'll just want to finish the transition. Okay, and with that done, let's go ahead and try it out. All right, and you could see the transition started right from the beginning. And let's see if we can have Igor here. And great, so the transition worked perfectly. The only problem here is that the camera is still smoothly going to the player, so we can fix this. And to fix this, we can just call a method called reset smoothing. If you look at the definition here, it just sets the camera position immediately to its current smoothing destination. And with that set, we can now defeat the boss and see, there we go. All right, one last thing, just to make sure the game is all ready to go, we're just going to set Igor's health back to 50 HP. Let's set the stage spawn point back to the beginning here. And then one thing I noticed is that our musics actually don't loop right now. So in order for them to loop, you can pick them up inside the properties here and look at the import, set loop to true, and click on re-import. Okay, and with all of that done, I believe that our game is now ready to go and ready to get published. I find that creating little games like this is just really rewarding, but actually seeing other people play your game and have fun while doing it is just the best part of game development. And what better way to share the game than to have it available online? So we'll be using a platform called itch.io to publish this game, and we're going to create a web export. So for that, going to click on Project, Export. If you've never done that before, this is going to be empty. You want to click on Add a new preset, click on the web, and here you're probably going to have a bunch of errors. This is fine, it just needs to have some form of template. This can be downloaded automatically online. Just click on Manage Export Templates and then click on Download and Install. All right, and once this is done, you can close and go back to Project, Export. We're just going to specify the export path. Let's just create a new folder. Let's call this exports, and we'll just create another folder called web in case you wanted to export it for Windows or Mac OS. This is perfectly fine. And let's just call this index.html. Click on save and then click on export all. And let's go for release. And there we go. Navigating to my Fist of Fury /exports, and I have this web folder that contains all the files which create the game. You can see that the whole game is 34 megs, which is really tiny. What we're going to be doing is selecting the whole thing, right-clicking, and then compress to and zip file. And here, by default, it should be index.zip, otherwise just rename it to index.zip. And now that this is done, this is just about ready to go and get uploaded on itch.io. Once that is complete, you want to navigate to the itch.io website. You'll probably need to create an account if you haven't done so already, and then you can click on your profile picture, click on Upload New Project. I'm going to call this one Fists of Fury, and this will automatically create a URL here. You probably want to add a description, some cover image, and so forth, and some screenshots if you want people to play it if you release it to the public. We're not going to be doing this right away, but I'll just show you how to publish it online. So what are we uploading? We're uploading a game. Kind of project is going to be an HTML file. And then the release status, I'm going to set mine to prototype since it's still very early on. Set to no payments. Let's go ahead and upload the file and go into the folder where you've exported and pick the zip file right here. Okay, we can set the viewport dimension. Ours is 1000 times 640. And then the rest, I believe, is fine. You can put some details here. Genre, you want to add some tags. All of that is fine. For now, I'm just going to disable the community, and I'm going to keep that as a draft. Or you can put it as a restricted and have, let's have a password. And here you can set whatever password you want, and you can then send that over to your friends. Okay, save and view page. This is going to load the game for the first time. And when we click on it, fingers crossed. And there we go. Now anyone who has your game URL can go ahead and play your game, enjoy themselves, and complain about every little bug that we may not have fixed. And with the game published and fully working, this is going to be the end of this first tutorial series. Huge congratulations, you did it. In the space of about 10 hours, you've created a complete beat-em-up game in Godot, and that's really something to be proud of. You're a champion for watching this until the end, but I really hope that this series has been helpful to you in understanding some fundamental concepts of the Godot game engine. I'm always around for questions, so please don't hesitate to ask. If I see a growing community around this YouTube channel, I'll be sure to create a Discord forum to engage more directly with each of you game developers. If you want to see more tutorial series, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This channel is brand new, so anything that can help raise awareness amongst the gazillion other videos will truly help me out. Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, if I ever get there, I'll have you pick the nature of the next tutorial series. Maybe we can focus on 3D this time and build some form of Minecraft clone or some other fun game like that. And now this is time for goodbye. I hope you had a nice day at the GameDev Tavern all this time. Now time to take a long break, probably play some Civilization 7, and then we'll get right back to building more fun games. Cheers!